I am the CEO and co-founder of PolicyMic. We launched in June 2011. I love coming to CUNY because we had a great fellow last year, Stephen Robert Morse. I don't know where he is right now, in the back. And our politics editor is actually a CUNY grad, also Michael McCutcheon. So we have deep ties to this institution and have found awesome talent here. So very briefly about us, we launched in 2011, June of 2011. We are a national and world news site for millennials by millennials. We're focused on hitting the young professional demographic that we think is very underserved by the major news outlets. We think we're the best at creating really high quality content for this age group, and we think we're the best at engaging them in high quality conversation about what's happening in the world the way they want to be engaged. There's three big points that are actually pretty different than the other two speakers, and I love those business models, and this is, we actually have tried a lot of that and it's worked, and so I'm going to focus on something that's a little bit different. I'm going to run through three ideas pretty quickly, and if you guys have questions, just interrupt me or we'll do Q&A at the end. I'm going to focus purely on advertising. I know we've all been sort of talking about advertising, but the way we think being successful on the web through advertising, there's three big lessons we've learned. One is you have to reach scale, and we'll sort of go through why reaching scale is so important. Second is having a targeted audience makes everything much more valuable. And then the third thing is creating assets. And so Noah actually hit on this a little bit, but whatever cool editorial events you're going to do, whatever cool editorial projects, making them repeatable and turning them into assets that you can sell to the same brand month after month, year after year, is a great way to sort of capitalize on all the hard work that you're doing for one event or for one project and make sure that you can easily repeat it the next year or the next month and sell it just as effectively. So reaching scale, a little bit about us and what we're doing. This is our homepage. As of this morning, we're reaching 5.3 million unique visitors per month, and we're still very small for what we're trying to do. That's Google Analytics, and then the actual measure that matters is the one at the bottom right of the page, ComScore. And so on ComScore, we're 2.7, which is still small for what we're trying to do. And why is that small? One, as you reach more people, your rates actually go up, which is a little bit counterintuitive, but the access you have to the advertising market is zero when you're small. I mean, you have to go through ad networks, you have to go through partners. You don't have enough scale to hire your own sales force to really make a dent. And so actually DNA's info, $14 CPMs is really impressive and hard to replicate. So if you want to get $14 CPMs and your audience isn't targeted in New York City, you actually have to reach a lot more people, and you have to be able to work with people directly, either agencies or brands. So rates go up as reach increases. I mean, for us, our target reach is 10 million on ComScore, and that's where we want to be, and that's where we think we'll be able to make a lot more money and have much higher ad rates. Why does reach matter so much? Agencies, if you're going to work directly with the big media agencies in New York, you need to be able to move the needle for them. I mean, they are taking they're taking $20 million budgets from XYZ company and chopping that into 100 different sites that each reach 1 million people is much harder than chopping that into 5 sites that each reach 5 or 10 million people. So agencies, I mean, we found that agencies are just starting to talk to us, but we're still like a baby blip on their radar, and we need to get twice as big for them to really want to engage us in conversation, because the way they make money is they'll sell 100 million impressions at a $5 CPM for the client, and they'll take $1 off the top of that. And so if you're not moving enough impressions for them, they're not really very interested in working with you. The last thing is, same sort of goes with brands. I mean, the big brands that have the big budgets, big digital budgets, they want to talk to people that can move the needle. And so scale is just really important. And I know this is kind of an obvious point, but reaching scale is just about having a product plan that gets you to scale. And so for us, the product plan is creating more content, working in more verticals, and being really, really effective about that. And so we've gone, I think last time I was here, we were at like 30 or 40 articles a day. Today we're at 85 articles a day, and that's where growth came from. And so, for us, we have a very concrete plan of how we're going to grow. And I think it's, a lot of people can build that into their business model, from the beginning if they want to. So, second big point is that your audience really, really matters. And so in the case, the two previous presenters, the New York City audience is ideal when it comes to advertisers and brands. Wealthy people that spend a lot of money, it's perfect. For us, our niche is millennials, and these are sort of smart millennials that want to engage with smart ideas. Very, very hard to reach on other platforms and other sites. And this is sort of how we pitch it. The big magic number for us is the ComScore index on the bottom right. 179 is good. The magic number for us is 200. And that's the 18 to 34-year-old demographic. And so for us, this is a slide out of our media deck that we present. Having a really targeted audience allows you to tell a much more compelling story when you go to brands and agencies. And that story is really what lets you sell. You have to be able to simplify the story and explain why you're reaching an audience that's really, really valuable to them and why you reach them differently than everybody else. This is sort of flip side in terms of, for us, our audience is also very, very engaged, and this is part of our story. The last, why audience really, really matters. I'm sure all of you have checked out, or maybe not, the website Refinery29. They're in the low single-digit million uniques per month, making, incredible amounts of revenue. That's because they are the, best place for women in their 20s to learn about high fashion. They are the online version of Vogue. Their advertising rates are through the roof. That's because they have a very, very targeted audience that is there to read about very specific things, and it's really easy to sell. And so, Refinery29 is, one of the best examples of this where their scale isn't amazing, but their business model is. Why does the audience really, really matter? Well, it's a differentiator from the, 50,000 sites out there. The second thing is, you'll see better conversion on ads. So on Refinery29, when Elle wants to run a campaign there, I'm not a fashion person, but when a fashion brand wants to run a campaign there, they'll see really good conversion. And then, if you're really the best in your category, you get included in all the media plans. And so, we like to, criticize the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, but they are the best in their category of world news, and everybody always wants to include them in their media plans. The last thing is create repeatable assets. So I think the best example of this is actually events and what Noah's doing with events. But when Noah creates his first event and brings in an audience of 200 people to somewhere in Brooklyn, the fact that he's got those 200 people there the first time, and if he spends 100 hours building that event, it's expensive to spend all that time, and it's a one-off. But if he now brands this as an annual or monthly event where these 200 people can then tell their friends that a month later there's 200 people coming, you can now sell a package to 6 events to a brand like American Express that wouldn't have bought the single event package. And so, think about the cool things you're doing and make them repeatable and make them into things that you can sell in a bigger way. So I think that's really cool. We have a sort of a different set of online assets that are interesting. But, I guess the other point when it comes to assets is when your editors come to you and say, hey, I've got this really insanely cool story that I want to run. It's going to be part video, part GIFs, part investigative journalism. You should really embrace that and then figure out how to sell it, because if your editor's really, really good or your journalist is really, really good, they're going to be creating something that nobody else can do, and that a lot of people want. And so you just need to figure out what the right way to sell what the right way to sell that is. And the company that I see this doing really, really well is Vice. I mean, they make videos. They go to North Korea and they get it sponsored by the biggest brands in the world, and that's a cool journalism project. Or they go to Antarctica to see who actually lives there and tell that story, and they get it sponsored by North Face. And so those are projects that actually came out of the editorial wing and then went to sales, and sales figured out the right brand to buy it. So it's I think that's a really good model, because you get much more authentic content that's actually cool, and brands are really excited to be there. And then the last thing I haven't mentioned is when it comes to video. There's a lot of talk about video, and everybody knows that CPMs on video are exponentially higher than CPMs on print. But if you can make video that's long-lasting, you're going to be in much, much better position. So, you can make a breaking news video about what happened this morning on the subway, which may be interesting and get a lot of traffic today, but won't be interesting tomorrow. Or you can make a video about, about the growth of the subway system and gentrification in New York. That'll be interesting for a year, and that second video is going to make a lot more money for you than the first video. And that's sort of another example of an asset that has much longer life. So those are my very quick ideas. They're not all perfect, but I'd love to hear your questions.
You mentioned a couple of times make conferences and events repeating. How precisely do you do that? How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the recent one that I've seen that does this really well is Women in the World, the Newsweek Daily Beast event. I mean, that's an annual event that I think when they started it thinking this is something we're going to do every year in March. And that's very different than saying, this year the big topic is women in the workplace because, all these people are talking about it. Let's have a one-off event off that. And so billing it as something that you're going to do every single year, it's not that complicated. It's just thinking about it as like picking a topic that you can then expand on every single year and will continue to be interesting. And then when you do it the next year, you already have your 8 brands lined up, 5 of which will probably do it again. And so I think you can think about a lot of your assets that way, not only events. If it comes to editorial series, I mean, we all have editorial calendars, and all of them repeat, pretty similarly every single year. And so that's the first example of an asset. Everybody here probably tries to sell their Fashion Week coverage to all these different brands. That's a perfect example of that. Just taking that to the next level in terms of as many products as you produce, think of them as assets that have their own brand, if that makes sense. Like the Daily Beast Women in the World brand is huge. I mean, it's super, super valuable. Yeah.
I'm Craig Bromberg. I do business development for different companies. Just curious how you're thinking about social and how you're using social within the context of news items to go beyond sort of like a RSS on steroids perspective.
Yeah, so you mean Facebook and Twitter mainly?
Any platform you want to work on.
Yeah, so I would say we're not super experts on Facebook and Twitter. I mean, we use Facebook and Twitter to grow our audience and distribute our content. And so, I would say the biggest way we use it is we look at our analytics and try to dial in very, very carefully on why something did really well on Facebook, why it did really well on Twitter, and how we can repeat that. So, somebody published an article for us that was, 5 schools that are better than the Ivies. And one of the schools was University of Florida. That story got 55,000 Facebook shares. And we looked at that traffic. It was all coming from Florida. It was pumping up the egos of this one school and very, very shareable in that one demographic. And that was a lesson we learned right there. Okay, if you're trying to drive traffic over Facebook, work on somebody's identity, pump it up, and make sure it's a big group, and they'll probably share it a lot. And so there's a lot of different applications to that one idea, but that was something our editorial team learned looking at the data.
Other questions?
Hi, Carrie Barber from Book Talk. Forgive me if you said this, but how do you get those exact analytics of your audience?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we do it two ways. One is, so which analytics? I guess the one we just talked about, or? Yeah. That's so we use a lot of different things for analytics, but Google Analytics is our number one. Our editors spend a lot of time on real-time analytics to figure out trends and keywords. So, when coverage was focused on Boston 2 weeks ago, or I guess 10 days ago, our real-time analytics, we had all the keywords that were working, why, and making sure we're covering the stories that are really important. So that's one editorial tool. We use Google Analytics through their API to pull data on every story every night. And so that's something that we built in-house, but it's super, super powerful. We've been experimenting with a platform called Parsley, which I'm sure some of you use. It's a New York City-based company that has publisher-specific analytics. It's really good, does a lot of things you would want it to do. All the editors get daily and nightly and weekly emails with all the stats and the rundowns on all their authors, and the stats and the rundown on their section, what's performing really well, and then we have meetings to try to explain why is this performing really well, so that next year when we're covering Fashion Week again, we can say, hey, this did really well in Fashion Week last year, let's do it again. It's much, much easier. When it comes to demographic data, there's ComScore, which is expensive, and you only really need to use it if you're going after big agencies and brands. Not super, super helpful. We have a big platform with 40,000 registered users, and so we have a lot of Facebook data that we can take from there. And then lastly, there's a company called Umbel, U-M-B-E-L, which is taking it to the next level when it comes to data on your audience. And you need to be Facebook connected to make that happen, but they can tell you how many of your users have an affinity to like this brand, Coca-Cola, who are these users, where are these users, and you can take that data to the brand, and it's just incredibly powerful. And so there's a lot of stuff happening. I mean, Parsley's a startup, Umbel's a startup, and they're doing super, super impressive stuff.
Any other questions? Okay. Oh, 1 second.
How big was your founding team, and what were the most critical elements to get started for something this
that's a really
size?
Good question. So we had 2 editors, myself, 2 web developers. We seeded the site with 200 contributors at the beginning. And we didn't grow our editorial team fast enough because our model is distributed writers, editors in our office. And we're now 14 editors, 3 web developers, and myself. And I would say adding more editors when we have a lot of content to improve on has been, we couldn't do it fast enough, if that makes sense. So you need a really good web developer in the beginning to do something like this, because when it comes to like plugging into analytics APIs, you need somebody who's like really into it and really wants to get it and can work with all these different platforms. So I would say having savvy tech people on your staff at the beginning, is probably the difference between us having 100,000 monthly unique visitors and 5 million, just because they were able to accelerate everything by being very savvy. I mean, like HuffPo, for example, right, they're at 65 million monthly unique visitors. That's because they are the #1 savviest people on the internet when it comes to SEO. And that makes a big difference.
Okay. Hi, I'm Kelly Barea, founder of the Urban Thinker magazine. I am wondering about if you could tell us a little bit about what stage of fundraising you're at and who your funders are.
Yeah. So we raised a seed round. So when we started, Jake and I, my co-founder, who was at change.org before, we each put in like $150K, or we put in 150K to run the site for a year. And that got us from 0 to, with a lot of help from smart people, to 300,000 monthly unique visitors. Then we raised about $400,000 from a big group of investors, sort of famous tech people, famous political people, the Knight Foundation, Digital News Ventures, which is part of the Media Loan Development Fund, and others. That took us for another year. I mean, we were working in our apartment in Harlem, and we had the whole, we were working and living in the same place, and we were spending no money for 2 years. And then we just raised 1.3 million from the same group and a few other angel investors. No big venture firms, and it was a hard sell. I mean, content is a hard sell, but we're trying to prove that there's a way to make high quality content that's smart and interesting and engaging work and make a lot of money. And so there are a few people that believe in us, I would say.
Do you have an estimate as to how far you are from breaking even?
Yeah, so we'll break even in the next 3 or 4 months. And that's purely because we've grown faster than we ever thought we would. But we're not spending a lot of money, and we have a big staff, but we're all 30 and under, and we don't, we're like packed like sardines into a little office 3 blocks from here. So we're not living large like a media company, like a lot of media companies do. But we think as we grow from 5 million to 10 million, we're going to unlock a whole nother level of advertising potential that's going to allow us to make a lot more money. So no, we went to VCs, and we got some of our investors are people who work in VCs, but they're angel investors, not institutional investors. There's 3 venture firms in New York that I think are really good at content, and we're still talking to them, but they like to invest in people that they've already worked with. So the people behind HuffPo, so Lear Ventures, they're experts #1 when it comes to content. There's Graycroft, which is really good at content, and there's a couple more smaller ones that are really big time experts at seed level content sites. And so we're still in discussions with them, but there's not a lot. I mean, if we were an e-commerce site, there's 55 investors we could go to in New York.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chris. That was great.